I watched red and blue lights strobe across the blood on my porch while Sheriff Grant holstered his smoking pistol. Felix lay still, and Clara clutched her belly, whispering, "Daddy." Grant didn't call an ambulance. He stared at me like I was the problem. Then Layla brushed past my children to grip his arm and hiss, "Did anyone see you?" That was the second I stopped being just a father. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. It was a Tuesday that started with warm cornbread and ended with sirens. I was rinsing plates when the tires screamed on gravel, 3 cruisers, doors slamming. Sheriff Grant first up the steps like he owned the wood under his boots. "Hands where I can see them," he barked. I raised my palms not because I feared him, because Clara and Felix were right behind me. Clara had that glow only a mother-to-be gets when hope is still bigger than fear. She held her belly with one hand and the porch rail with the other. Felix pressed into my leg wide-eyed, trying to be brave because he thinks fathers make everything safe. I wish I could tell you the world always honors that. "What is this?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Wrong address. You're at my home." Grant didn't answer. He stepped closer, jaw tight, right hand hovering near his sidearm like habit or threat. The 2 deputies fanned out, pretended to look interested in the azaleas. The evening hummed with summer and something ugly. Then it happened fast. The kind of fast where your body moves and your mind can't catch up. A shout from the yard. A deputy tripped over the wagon toy Felix left by the steps. Grant pivoted, drew, and in that half-second of chaos, 2 shots cracked the air like bone. Clara folded with a sound I've only heard on battlefields, and Felix went quiet, in a way an 8-year-old should never go quiet. The world didn't go slow for me, it sped up. I dropped to my knees, my hands finding pressure and prayer at the same time. "Stay with me, baby," I whispered to Clara, her dress blooming red under my fingers. "Felix," I called, but his eyes stared past the porch lights into a sky he should have had years to learn. "Call the ambulance," I said. My voice didn't shake, it cut. Grant didn't move for his radio. He looked at me, then at Layla's car pulling up the drive like a storm had pulled it there. She ran past Felix, past Clara, straight to Grant. She grabbed his forearm, nails digging into his uniform. "Did anyone see you?" she whispered, and the last piece of my old life slipped like water between my fingers. "She needs a medic now," I said. "If she loses that baby." Grant finally clicked his radio. "We've got an accidental discharge," he said as if his mouth had practiced making horror sound harmless. "Scene secure. Send EMS." Then to me, "Back up. You're interfering." "Interfering?" I stared at him. My son was limp. My daughter bled and breathed like each breath asked permission. "This is my house. It's a scene now," he said. He squared up, shoulder angling like he wanted me to swing. He would have loved that. An arrest would cover a multitude of sins. I didn't swing. The part of me that learned patience in sand and rain and blacked out air knew better. I pressed my hand on Clara's side, felt tiny flutters beneath my palm, life fighting. "You're okay," I told her. "You hear me? You're okay." Layla knelt finally, but not beside Clara. She hovered near Grant like he was the wounded one. "It was an accident," she said loud enough for me to hear. "Mason, stop, you're making it worse." I looked at my wife and saw a stranger in my yard wearing her face. "Worse than this?" I asked. Her eyes didn't meet mine. They tracked Grant waiting for his cues like a trained lion. The ambulance took 9 minutes. I counted each one by Clara's gasps. The paramedics moved like mercy, quick and certain. They didn't care about badges or stories, they cared about a heartbeat and a chance. They took Clara first, then Felix. I stayed. Someone had to sign. Someone had to stare at Grant long enough for him to know I memorized every blink. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights turned everyone pale and honest. I signed papers with hands that still smelled like bleach and blood. A nurse named Morgan pressed a cup of water into my palm and touched my shoulder like I hadn't turned to stone. "We're doing everything," she said. "Don't leave." As if I could. Layla paced, calling someone who wouldn't answer inside the building. Grant walked in 20 minutes later like he was visiting a neighbor, not 2 people he'd just cut down. He didn't look at me. He went straight to Layla. They stood by the vending machines under a flickering bulb. He spoke low. She nodded, eyes darting, hands twisting her wedding band round and round until the skin reddened. I took a step their way and a uniform blocked me. "Stay in the family area," he said without pain in it. He was a wall with a badge, and tonight the walls all had badges. Family. The word landed heavy. "What do you call someone who walks past her bleeding children to steady the man who shot them?" Not wife, not mother, something else. Morgan returned softer now. Your daughter's in surgery, she said. Your son is in pediatric ICU. The doctors, they're good. She squeezed my arm, then leaned closer, almost a whisper. The report says accidental discharge, but the entry angles. She stopped herself. Just stay close. I sank into the plastic chair, fingers interlocked so tight my knuckles looked like chalk. In the reflection of the waiting room window, I didn't see the man I'd tried to be for 25 years. I saw the other one. The one who could wait longer than a fuse, watch quieter than a shadow, and never lose sight once he chose a target. I didn't choose revenge in that chair, I chose truth. Truth is slower than rage, but it cuts deeper. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs time and a steady hand. A deputy walked past, phone to his ear. He's calm, he said. Too calm. He glanced at me like I was a puzzle with teeth. Let them underestimate calm. Calm is where men like me get dangerous. I stood and took a few steps to stretch the stiffness out of old bones and older habits. Through the glass pane of a side corridor I saw them, Layla and Grant, dim light, close enough to share breath. She reached for his hand and he didn't pull away. He leaned toward her ear, lips shaping a single word I could read even through cheap reflection and distance. Tonight. The hallway hummed. A code was called over the intercom for some other family's worst moment. My worst moment had already happened. The next one belonged to them. I turned back to the chair, sat down and stared at the wall clock. I started counting again. Not minutes this time. Moves. I stopped counting minutes and started counting moves. Grant had whispered tonight to my wife, and the way she held his arm told me it wasn't about prayers for our kids. It was about control, about making sure I stayed exactly where they needed me, quiet, confused, alone. A doctor in green scrubs finally came toward me, fatigue written in the lines around her eyes. Her badge said Harper. She didn't sit. People who sit are about to stay in comfort. She stayed on her feet. Clara is out of surgery, she said. We managed to stop the internal bleeding. The baby's heart is still beating, but both are very fragile. The next 24 hours are critical. And Felix? The name felt like gravel in my throat. He's in a medically induced coma. The bullet didn't hit his brain, but there's swelling. We're doing everything we can. She paused, choosing words. He's a fighter. You can't teach that. He came in fighting. I nodded, because if I opened my mouth something inside me might crawl out and never go back in. Can I see them? One at a time, just a few minutes. Stay by the bed, don't touch any tubes. Let the nurses guide you. She started to turn, then hesitated. Mr. Mason, right? I nodded. Her voice dropped. When this settles, you may want a second opinion on the official version of what happened. Not tonight, but don't sign anything you don't understand. Are they asking me to sign something? They will, she said. They always do when uniforms are involved. In Felix's room, machines did the talking. His small chest rose under a sheet, a plastic mask fogging and clearing with each assisted breath. There was a cartoon sticker on the IV pole. Someone had tried to make the drip look less like a threat and more like a friend. I traced the outline of his foot under the blanket with 2 fingers, careful not to disturb anything. Hey buddy, I whispered. You remember when you asked me if monsters are real? I told you no, I was wrong. They are, but they bleed like everyone else. He didn't move. The monitor kept its steady beeping, indifferent to my promises. Clara's room smelled like metal and antiseptic, and something sweeter, like the ghost of the candle she used to burn in her room, vanilla and cheap hope. Her face was pale above the tape and tubing, but she looked older somehow, as if the bullet had taken a slice of childhood with it. One hand rested near her belly, fingers curled but not quite into a fist. I'm here, I said softly. I'm not leaving you. I should have seen this coming. That's on me. But what happens next? That's on them. I wanted to stay until the sun rose and the night shift changed and the world remembered we existed. Instead, a uniform appeared in the doorway like a shadow attached to a badge. Sir, we need a statement, he said. Sheriff wants to clear things up. Of course he did. They led me to a small consultation room, with beige walls and a Bible on the shelf no one had opened in a decade. Grant was already there, alone, leaning against the table like it was a bar top, and he was on his second beer. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Mason, he said, like we were old friends catching up. Hell of a night. I didn't sit. You shot my kids. His smile twitched. That's not how this is going to read. You know that. There was a warrant mix-up. High stress. Deputy stumbled. I reacted to a perceived threat. You've been in the guthers. You get it. I get that my daughter was unarmed on her own porch. He sighed, like I was being unreasonable. Look, man, I don't want this to ruin what's left of your family. The state comes in. They see a prior service guy with combat history, 2 injured minors, firearms in the house. Next thing you know, Child Protective Services is sniffing around. Do you really want Felix and that baby in the system? There it was, the move. He wasn't talking about justice. He was talking about leverage. You're threatening to take my kids, I asked. I'm telling you how this plays if you make it adversarial. He slid a form across the table, a neat stack of paper with official seals that made lies look important. You signed that this was an accident, that you understand the risks of law enforcement operations. This stays local. No need for the state boys or the feds. We all walk away with our lives intact. He tapped the signature line with a chewed pen. You've got a little PTSD in your record, right? Couple of blacked out admin notes from your time overseas. You really want that dug up in court? Lawyers love that stuff. Suddenly, you're the unstable one who escalated things. They're good at spinning. I've seen it. He thought he was educating me about spin. I helped nations fall apart quietly for a living once. He was playing checkers on a chessboard he didn't know existed. What does Layla think? I asked. Mason, your wife is a wreck, he said, with just the right amount of scripted sympathy. She's worried about you, worried you'll do something stupid that makes this worse. She wants you home with her, not in some courtroom reliving your worst days. I imagined Layla in this very room, nodding at those same lines. Maybe she cried, maybe she didn't have to. Grant was good at reading fear. That's what bullies are, talented fear readers. I'll read it, I said, picking up the papers. I didn't. I just looked at the shape of words, not the meaning. You'll get it back when I'm done. He frowned. That wasn't in his script. We need to close this, Mason. Oh, it'll close, I said. One way or another. Our eyes met for a second longer than was safe. He looked away first. That told me more than any witness ever could. Outside the room, Layla was waiting, arms folded like she was the one under attack. Her mascara had run, but the redness in her eyes looked more like rage than grief. What did you say to him? She demanded. What did you say to him before I got here? I shot back. She flinched, then recovered. Mason, this was an accident. He's the sheriff, for God's sake. If you turn this into some vendetta, they will drag our family through the mud. They'll say you're crazy, they'll use your service against you. Is that what you want for Clara? For Felix? They're already lying about what happened, I said. You saw it. I saw you yelling, she snapped. I saw you getting in his face, making everything worse. You scared the kids. They were scared because they were shot, Layla. Something flickered across her face, a tiny crack in the mask. Guilt or annoyance that I wouldn't play my part. You always have to be the hero, she muttered. Always have to have an enemy. There is an enemy, I said quietly. He wears our sheriff's badge, and he walks into your arms like he owns them. Her jaw clenched. You're tired. You're saying things you'll regret. I leaned in just enough so only she could hear me. I heard you out on the porch. Did anyone see you? That's not what a wife says to the man who just shot her children. That's what an accomplice says. Her eyes darted down the hallway, checking who might have heard. You don't know what you heard, she whispered. You're in shock. Just go home. Shower, sleep. Let the professionals handle this. I almost laughed. The last time professionals handled things for me, I ended up 3 continents away cleaning up their mess in the dark. I wasn't about to outsource my children's lives to a man who lit a cigarette over their blood. But I nodded slowly. Let her think she was winning. Let Grant think I was considering his deal. A man who believes you're broken stops watching your hands so closely. I'll go home, I said. Get some clothes. I'll be back in the morning. She softened, mistaking strategy for surrender. Good, that's good. She reached for my arm like habit, then let it fall when I didn't meet her halfway. The drive back was shorter than I remembered, probably because my mind filled in blank space with plans instead of pain. The house sat under the same sky, but it looked different, smaller, colder, like it belonged to another family in a photograph I'd found in a thrift store. Yellow tape fluttered at the edge of the porch, half torn, like someone had remembered procedure just long enough to make a mess. The blood was gone. Bleach had been poured over wood and concrete until the air burned my throat. They'd scrubbed my children's pain off the floor faster than they'd stabilized them. Inside, the living room was almost back to normal. Couch pushed into place, lamp upright, only a faint scuff on the floor where Clara had fallen. A throw blanket Layla liked was folded neatly on the armrest, as if we were expecting company, not detectives. They tried to erase it, all of it, as if nothing had happened, as if it was just a Tuesday again. I walked down the hallway to Felix's room. His bed was made, the superhero comforter smooth, toys lined on the shelf. Someone had picked up the Lego he'd left by the door, the one I'd nearly broken my toe on last week. I crouched and placed it back exactly where it had been. A tiny piece of chaos in a house that had been sanitized into a lie. In our bedroom, the sheets had been stripped and changed. Fresh linen. No trace of the night Layla had slept there knowing what Grant had done. Maybe she'd thought clean sheets meant a clean slate, a reset. But would remembers wait? Walls remember whispers. I stood in the center of the room, listening to the silence. Not the peaceful kind. The hell-breath kind. The kind before a shot, before a storm, before a decision you can't walk back from. If the law belonged to them, I needed something older than law. Something I'd buried because I wanted to believe I'd never need it again. I grabbed a flashlight from the junk drawer, the one that still held rubber bands and dead batteries, and a key to a storage unit we'd stopped paying for years ago. Then I stepped out the back door, the hinges whining softly like they were warning me. The grass behind the shed was overgrown, hiding the slight dip in the earth only I knew was there. I fetched a shovel from the side of the house, its handle rough under my palm. I hadn't dug a hole for anything but fence posts and tomato plants in a long time. Tonight, I started digging for a different reason. The first shovel bite lifted the smell of wet roots and old summers. I kept my breathing even, one cut of earth after another, until the blade knocked against steel. I knelt and brushed dirt with my palms until the edges showed. A weather-sealed case, the color of rain clouds, the weight of decisions I thought I'd buried for good. Inside, everything slept where I'd left it. Broken-down rifle wrapped in oiled cloth. Scope in its foam cradle. A field notebook with mud still pressed into the cover from a country I don't talk about. A coil of paracord. A folded ghillie wrap that still carried the grit of another life. Under it all, a coin, unit crest on one side, a date on the other, a reminder of the men who never got to bury anything. On the workbench in the shed, I laid each piece out like a confession. The cloth came away clean. The metal gleamed. I checked the bolt, the lugs, the crown. No pitting, no rust. I ran and patched through the barrel until it came out white. The scope's glass was clear. I shouldered the rifle bare, no magazine, no round, settled in behind the stock, and found the fence post at the far edge of the field. There's a nail in that post I hammered in years back to hang wind chimes for Felix. The crosshairs sat on that nail like they'd never left it. I wasn't here to hunt a man tonight. I was here to remember the habits that would keep us alive. I reassembled the case, locked it, and slid it under the workbench's false bottom, not ready to carry the rifle back into the house. Not yet. There's a difference between being prepared and declaring war. Truth first. Proof first. Rage can wait its turn. In the kitchen, I opened the junk drawer and took the small toolkit no one else knew how to use. From the cupboard above the stove, I pulled down the spare smoke detector I'd bought years ago and never hung because it wasn't a smoke detector. Inside the shell, a pinhole camera and a tiny SD card. I stood on a chair and swapped it with the real one on the ceiling, threaded the wire through, clicked the faceplate into place. In the living room vent, I tucked a voice-activated recorder behind the slats. Its mic facing the couch where Layla liked to talk when she thought no one was listening. Under the kitchen table, I taped another mic to a crossbar, tight and high so no knees would find it. I moved like I used to move in houses that didn't belong to me. Gloves on, steps light, attention wide. No extra fingerprints. No disturbed dust. The house saw me but wouldn't remember I'd been there. In our bedroom, I opened the closet and stared at the neat line of Layla's shoes, between a pair of heels she wore to the church auction and a pair of flats she wore to look harmless. A small envelope sat where no envelope should have been. I slid it free. Inside, $300 in cash and a hotel keycard without a logo, the kind you get from a highway place that prides itself on not asking questions. I put both back exactly as they'd been, angle and weight the same, because some traps are sprung by inches. Downstairs, I found the stack of forms Grant had pushed across the hospital table. I set them under a lamp and photographed each page with my phone, slow and flat to avoid glare. Liability language, waiver language, words meant to sand down the edges of bullets until they sounded like policy. When you strip the official stamps off, lies look small and mean. On a yellow legal pad I wrote what mattered: evidence of the affair, Evidence of intent. Evidence of corruption. Protect Clara and Felix. For lines. For targets. You don't win by shooting at the whole world. You win by picking the right inch and not missing. The driveway gravel whispered. Headlights turned at the far bend and swept the living room wall with a slow arc. I slid into the mudroom, slipped out the side door, and crossed to the detached garage. The old truck waited inside, its bench seat familiar, its radio dead, its windows dirty enough to hide me but clean enough to see through. I cracked the passenger window an inch so sound had a way in, then set a tablet on my lap. The kitchen feed bloomed to life. Wide angle, high corner, the table, the sink, the back door. Below it, the vent recorder's input jumped with my own breath, then steadied. Layla came in like a woman returning to an ordinary house. Keys in the bowl, purse on the counter. She turned on the sink and scrubbed her hands longer than soap demands, as if suds could change a night's facts. She checked her phone twice in 1 minute. The blue light painted her face a color I didn't recognize. She went to the bedroom. The camera caught empty kitchen, the hum of the fridge, the small sway of a charm on the cabinet door. A star Felix had glued there last Christmas because he thought kitchens needed constellations too. 10 minutes later, Layla came back in fresh clothes, hair damp, face bare. She stood by the back door with the phone in both hands. Typed, erased, typed again, sent. A text tone answered almost immediately. She exhaled like someone had opened a window in a burning room. I didn't need to see the name on the screen to know who it was. Some things don't require proof to be true. Proof is for court, knowing is for war. She unlocked the back door and turned off the kitchen light, then left one lamp on low, the way you do when you're trying to make a home look calm. She sat at the table with her hands folded like a schoolgirl waiting to be called on. 4 minutes passed. 5. The vent recorder stayed flat, just house noise and her shallow breathing. My pulse didn't go up. Bodies lie. Patterns don't. Patterns tell you everything. Headlights again. Briefer. Blacker. Not up the drive. Somewhere on the road beyond the trees. Stopping where tires don't crunch gravel. A shadow peeled away from the darkness and moved along the fence line to the side gate. The back door opened without a knock. Grant stepped into my kitchen like he had a key to it. He didn't touch her. She didn't touch him. He kept his hat in his hand like a man visiting a widow after church. He sat. She sat. They faced each other across the wrong side of our table. The recorder blinked green, then steady. The mic caught the first small sounds. The scrape of a chair leg. The soft clack of a ring against wood. The exhale a man makes when his story is about to start. I lowered the tablet brightness until the screen was a ghost in my lap. Whatever they said next would not be about grief. It would be about arrangement. About story. About what to erase and what to leave behind. I'd lived long enough in rooms like that to recognize the choreography. I didn't pray for confessions. I didn't need apologies. I needed Layla to hand me the wire I could pull that would unravel all of it. In the truck's dark cab, I could smell dirt under my nails and bleach drifting from the kitchen. I could hear the old house breathe before it spoke. I kept still enough for the recorder to forget I existed, and I let them talk. At first, there was just the small talk of guilty people, cleared throats, moving chairs, the clink of a glass on wood. Then the recorder picked up Layla's voice, low and sharp around the edges. "This place still smells like bleach," she said. "You could have at least told them not to pour half the bottle on the floor," Grant answered, calm like always. "That's how they do it. Procedure. You want blood on the porch every time you come home." "I don't want any of this," she snapped. This wasn't the plan. There it was. Plan. One word opening a door. Grant exhaled. The sound of someone who thinks he's the only adult in the room. "You think I wanted it this way?" Your boy came charging out. She stepped in front of him. Everything went sideways. I reacted. "That's what I do." "Don't call him your boy. Like you care," she shot back. "You didn't even check if he was breathing." "I had to secure the scene," he said, defaulting to the script. "And I had to keep your husband from doing something stupid." From the truck, I watched her hands on the table, fingers twisting her ring. "He's not stupid," she said. "He's suspicious. There's a difference." "He heard me outside. He heard noise," Grant said. "He's in shock. By tomorrow, half of tonight will feel like a bad dream. We just have to give him the right one to wake up in." "How?" she asked. "He's already pushing back." "He didn't sign your papers." "He will," Grant said. "He doesn't have a choice. A guy with his past, one word from me about episodes, about temper, about weapons in the house, the state will eat him alive." You think a judge is going to side with a retired sniper over a sitting sheriff? In the dark cab, my jaw clenched so hard my molars bust. I hadn't told him what I used to be. He dug that up himself, or Layla had handed it to him. She fell quiet for a second. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped into something almost pleading. You told me no one would get hurt. I said I'd try, he corrected. But your daughter didn't leave me many options. Showing up at my office like that, throwing her pregnancy in my face, threatening to tell him everything. She forced my hand. Pregnancy. He said the word like it was a problem to be solved, not a life to be guarded. She was scared, Layla said. You cornered her in that parking lot last week. You grabbed her arm. I saw the bruise. So now I'm the bad guy because I didn't want her blowing up all our lives, he shot back. You like the house you live in, the car you drive, you think that all came from his pension? Silence on the line. She didn't deny it. I've kept this town quiet for a long time, he went on. Kept certain names out of reports. Made sure a lot of people, including you, didn't have to face consequences. All I needed from you was stability at home. Someone who wouldn't let their kid play hero. She's not a kid, Layla said softer. She's 23, and she was as carrying. She stopped herself like she'd walked too close to a cliff. Grant filled the gap. She's carrying complications, and if she talks, every choice you made these last 2 years comes out. Mason finds out what that hotel key is really for. What all those church committee nights really bought you. Think he forgives that? On the screen, her shoulders sagged. I could almost see the moment she remembered the envelope in her closet, the cash, the anonymous room numbers. You promised you'd handle it without this, she said, glancing toward where she knew the porch used to be stained. Scared her, you said. Make her back off, you said. And I tried. He insisted. You think I went there planning to fire my weapon? I went there to wave a piece of paper and talk about warrants and how ugly things can get when folks don't listen. Then your husband had to start with his questions. Then the kids come out. Then my deputy trips. All it takes is one bad second. You know that. She let out a bitter laugh. You're supposed to be the one who handles bad seconds. And I did, he said. No one's dead, yet we can still fix this. But only if you keep your nerve. You go soft on me now, start crying to him, start talking about how you didn't know, the whole story falls apart. I can't protect you from that. Protect me, she said. Is that what you call this? What would you call it? He asked quietly. You were drowning in a life you hated. I threw you a line, you took it. Now you don't get to pretend your hands are clean because you don't like where the boat's headed. I watched her flinch. He wasn't wrong about one thing. She'd chosen this. Not tonight, but long before. He's not going to just let this go, she said. You didn't see his face at the hospital. I saw enough, Grant replied. He's tired. He's alone. His whole identity is wrapped up in being the protector. Right now, that's been ripped out from under him. Men like that collapse or cling. We just have to give him something to cling to. Guilt, fear for his kids. A story where he gets to be the bigger person who forgives and moves on. And if he doesn't? She asked. A pause. You can hear truth coming in the spaces people try to leave empty. Then I do what I have to, he said, for both of us. The recorder caught the chair creak as she shifted away. You're talking about she couldn't say it. I'm talking about not letting some washed-up soldier blow up everything I've built because he suddenly remembers he used to be dangerous. He said, you told me you were done with a ghost. Don't change your mind now. Washed up, ghost. He was closer to the mark than he knew. Layla's next words were a whisper. I didn't sign up for murder. Neither did I, he said. But sometimes the line moves, and sometimes you don't see it till you've already crossed. She went quiet long enough that I thought the recorder had cut. When she spoke again, her voice had that brittle brightness she uses at holiday dinners. So what do we do tomorrow? Tomorrow, he said. You cry with him. You tell him you're scared he's going to snap, that you're worried all this is bringing back whatever hell he went through over there. You suggest he see somebody, maybe talk to a counselor from the VA. We build a little file on him, nothing major, just enough paper so if we need to say he's unstable, it doesn't sound crazy. You want me to set him up as crazy, she repeated. I want you to protect yourself, he corrected. If he goes along with the accident story, if he signs, if he stays in his lane, you got nothing to worry about. But if he starts poking around, asking questions, digging where he shouldn't, he let the threat hang. You really think he'll just accept that his kid's getting shot was a mistake? She asked. He accepted a lot worse when somebody in a suit called it collateral damage, Grant said. Men like him are trained to swallow things for the greater good. We just have to convince him this is one of those times. He didn't understand that I stopped swallowing other people's greater good the day I put that rifle in a box. They went on for another 10 minutes, stitching together alibis and half-truths. Times they'd been at committee meetings together. Nights she'd slept at her sister's when really she'd been 20 miles down the highway in a room with no pictures on the walls. Cases he'd closed by losing evidence. Stories he'd buried by moving a decimal in a report. I listened, not as a husband hearing betrayal for the first time, but as an operator mapping a network. Who he paid, who owed him, which deputies were just lazy and which were rotten to the core. Names, dates, places. Each one another small weight on his side of the scale. When Grant finally stood, his chair scraping back, he said, "I'll swing by here in the afternoon, see how he's handling things. If he starts looking at you sideways, you call me. Early. And if he doesn't?" she asked. "Then we keep going like we planned," he said. "You with him for appearances, you with me when you can stand it. In a year, this is just a bad memory." He left the way he'd come, through my back door, along my fence, into the night, like a man who believed darkness belonged to him. Layla sat alone at the table for a long time after he was gone. No tears, no prayers, just staring at her own hands like she was trying to decide who they belonged to now. When she finally killed the light and went upstairs, I closed the tablet and sat in the truck until my legs tingled from staying still. Then I went back inside, collected the SD card, and slid it into a small plastic sleeve. I labeled it with a date and a word, kitchen. Evidence of the affair, evidence of intent, evidence of corruption, protect Clara and Felix. One line checked off. They thought tomorrow was theirs to shape. They hadn't accounted for the man in the truck, the rifle in the shed, and the truth sitting cold on a memory card the size of my thumbnail. By morning, the house looked normal, and I looked like every other man in a hospital waiting room, unshaved, hollow-eyed, holding a coffee he wasn't drinking. That was fine. Let them see a tired father. Let them miss the man counting seconds and exits. Harper found me first. "Clara made it through the night," she said. "Vitals are holding. We're keeping her sedated so her body can focus on healing. Baby's still with us, but it's fragile." "And Felix?" I asked. "Stable, no change," she said. "That's not bad news. Not yet. Sometimes no change is a good day in ICU." I thanked her, because that's what you do when someone stands between you and the dark. Then I took my seat and watched the play unfold. Layla arrived an hour later in sweats and a hoodie. No makeup. Her hair pulled back in a way that said devastated wife to anyone who didn't know her. She hugged me, stiff around the shoulders, like someone reenacting something they'd seen in a movie. "We'll get through this," she murmured. "We have to." I let her hold on a second longer than I wanted, then pulled away. "I'm going to sit with Clara," I said. "You check on Felix." Her eyes searched my face, looking for signs that last night's talk with Grant had sunk its claws in. I kept my expression flat. Confusion reads safer than clarity. In Clara's room, machines still hummed their steady backing track. I sat, took out my phone, and plugged in headphones. To anyone walking by, I was a tired dad zoning out to music. In my ears, the kitchen conversation from last night played again, this time not for heartbreak, but for intel. I replayed every second where Grant mentioned money, product, our friends on the other side of town. Twice he slipped, once with a street name, once with a time. I got to swing by Ridgeview tonight anyway, check the unit, make sure everything's where it should be. Ridgeview unit, at 11:30, he'd said. I checked the timestamp, that was an hour before he shot my kids. Busy night for a man who claimed to be answering a call. I backed out of the file, opened the Notes app, and wrote 2 words. Ridgeview Storage. I didn't know if that was the exact name, but it was enough to start. Small towns don't have many places to hide a side business. Stash houses stand out if you know what you're looking for. I spent the day being what everyone expected. I held Felix's hand. I watched Clara sleep. I let Layla cry on my shoulder just long enough for the nurses to see loving parents supporting each other instead of 2 people building separate lives. When Grant appeared in the doorway mid-afternoon, hat in hand, I nodded at him like a man too numb to pick a fight. "Any change?" he asked, eyes flicking to the monitors more than the beds. "Doc says they're fighters," I said. "We'll see." He pulled a face meant to look sympathetic. "You think any more about those forms?" We can make this go away, Mason, at least on paper. I let my shoulders sag. Haven't slept. Can't think straight. I'll look tonight. He clapped my arm like a buddy at a barbecue. Don't overthink it. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your family is let something be an accident. I smiled just enough to be mistaken for agreement. Inside, I moved another piece on a board he didn't know he was standing on. When the sun dipped and the day nurses changed with the night crew, I kissed Clara's forehead, told Felix about a game we'd watched together when he woke up, and told Layla I was going home to shower and maybe try to sleep. Don't stay away long, she said. I don't like being here alone. You're not alone, I said. You've got the whole sheriff's department looking out for you. Her flinch was tiny, but I saw it. Ridgeview Lane sat on the far edge of town, where businesses go when they don't need foot traffic. Auto shops, a tire yard, a long row of corrugated metal doors behind a faded sign that said Ridgeview Self-Storage, in letters that had once been blue. No security guard, one camera on a crooked pole at the gate, a keypad with worn numbers. The kind of place some people use to store Christmas decorations and other people use to store scents. I parked the truck down the road where I could see the entrance in my side mirror. Summer air hummed with insects and a distant highway. At 9:45, a county-issue SUV rolled past, windows tinted darker than standard. I watched the brake lights flash as it turned into Ridgeview. I waited until it left 20 minutes later, lighter in the back, then gave it another hour. Patience is a weapon if you let it be. At 11:10, I slipped the bolt cutters from behind my seat, pulled a ball cap low over my eyes, and walked the ditch line until I reached the chain-link fence behind the units. One cut, a quiet peel-back of metal, and I was inside. Rose C, Unit 17. That's what he'd said when bragging to Layla about making sure C-17 stays invisible. They always think their code words are clever. They never imagine someone like me is listening. The lock on C-17 was new, shiny brass against chipped paint. I knelt, worked the shackle with a small pry bar until it popped with a soft sigh. Inside, the air was thick with dust and chemical tang. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, chain wrapped twice around itself. I clicked it on. Neat stacks of shoe boxes that didn't hold shoes. A row of duffel bags along the back wall. 2 large plastic bins with hardware store labels that meant nothing. I picked one at random, flipped the lid. Bundles of cash and rubber bands, all small bills. Street money. The other bin held vacuum-sealed bricks that could have been flour but weren't. I didn't need a lab test to know what paid for the nice suits and unmarked trucks. I didn't touch more than I had to. No fingerprints, no lingering. I wasn't here to steal, I was here to hurt. On a metal shelf by the door sat a small fire extinguisher. The irony not lost on me. I took it down, waited, set it aside. From my pocket, I pulled a Ziploc with a rag soaked earlier in gasoline from my lawnmower can. I laid the rag under the shelf beneath the cash bin, then ran a thin line of the gas along the concrete like a fuse, just enough to catch, not enough to blow the whole place to the highway. From my other pocket, I took a kitchen timer. White plastic dial face, the kind Layla used to burn casseroles. I'd gutted it that afternoon, wiring its bell trigger to a cheap camping lighter I'd stripped down. When the timer hit 0, the striker would spark, the flameless tip would ignite the vapor over the rag, and by the time anyone smelled smoke, the money would be a bad memory. I set the timer for 18 minutes. Long enough for me to be far away. Short enough that whoever checked this place on a schedule would still be home, not on patrol. Before I left, I reached under my shirt and took out the thing I'd kept in my pocket since I opened that metal case behind the shed. A single .308 shell casing, polished clean. I set it on the empty part of the shelf, standing upright, centered. A brass period at the end of a sentence he hadn't read yet. I turned off the light, closed the door, fitted the broken lock back in place so from a distance it still looked whole, then slipped back through the fence to the ditch. By the time I reached the truck, stars had shifted and my timer had chewed away a third of its time. I didn't stay to watch. Men who admire their own explosions get caught. I drove to a gas station 3 miles away, went inside, and bought coffee I didn't want, making sure the security camera caught my face, my timestamp transaction, my alibi. Outside, leaning against the truck, I watched the distant sky over the storage row. At minute 18, a faint orange blush bloomed low on the horizon. A moment later, the echo of sirens rolled across the fields. Volunteer fire, maybe a deputy or two, if they weren't already busy writing up accidental discharges. I sipped my coffee, let the bitterness anchor me. Back home, I washed my hands until the smell of gas gave way to soap. I sat at the table and wrote another line on the yellow pad under my list. Hit his money. The phone buzzed just as I set the pen down. Unknown hospital number. For a second, every muscle in my body forgot how to move. "This is Mason," I answered. "Mr. Mason, it's Morgan from the night shift," she said. "I thought you'd want to know. When we checked vitals just now, Clara," she squeezed my hand when I said your name. Just once, but it was strong. I closed my eyes. The room spun, not from shock this time, but from something dangerously close to hope. "Thank you," I said. "Call me if anything else changes. Anything." When I hung up, I looked at the list again. Evidence of the affair, evidence of intent, evidence of corruption. Protect Clara and Felix. One of my kids had just told the world, in the smallest way, that she was still here. It was time to start listening for what else she knew. The next morning, the hospital felt different. Same buzzing lights, same antiseptic air, but under it all there was a low thrum like the building itself was holding its breath. Maybe it was just me, maybe I'd finally stopped floating and my boots were back on the ground. Harper met me in the hallway outside ICU, chart in hand. There was a new tightness around her mouth, the kind doctors get when hope and caution are wrestling. "She's responding more," she said. "Pupil response is good. Reflexes are there. We're going to lighten her sedation a bit. See how she does breathing more on her own. She may be confused, disoriented. Don't press her, just be there." "I've been there her whole life," I said. "I can do it another day." She gave the faintest smile. "Not everyone does." Then she added, "If she says anything about what happened, even fragments, ask us to write it down. It matters." I knew how much words can matter when the people in uniform start writing their version first. Inside Clara's room, the machines were still an orchestra, but some wires were gone. Less plastic, more skin. Her eyelids fluttered when I said her name like something inside was trying to find its way back through heavy curtains. "Hey kiddo," I said, taking the chair. "You gave us a scare. That's enough drama for this decade, okay?" Her fingers twitched. I wrapped mine around them, gentle. After a moment she squeezed. Once, deliberate, not a reflex, a choice. "Clara, it's Dad," I said. "You're safe. You're in the hospital. They fixed you up as best they could. Baby's still hanging in there, stubborn like you." Her lips parted, a dry crack of sound too soft to be words. I leaned closer, felt her breath, shallow but real. Her eyes opened a sliver, dark and unfocused, then worked to track toward my voice. "Don't fight it," I murmured. "Just listen. You don't have to talk yet. We've got time." Time. A lie I wanted to believe. She blinked slowly, once, twice, then her gaze shifted, not to me, but to the side table where a plastic hospital pen lay next to a folded pamphlet about coping with trauma. The corner of the pamphlet lifted slightly in the air current from the vent, like it was raising its hand. "You want to write?" I asked. Her fingers tightened around mine, then released. I placed the pen in her hand. It wobbled, nearly slid free, but she trapped it between two fingers. I slid the pamphlet under the edge of her palm, flipped it to the blank back. "Small words," I said. "Take your time." It was painful to watch. Every letter cost her something. The pen scratched, stopped, scratched again. Her breathing hitched with the effort. I wanted to tell her to rest, that none of this could be as urgent as her healing, but Harper's voice echoed in my head. "If she says anything, it matters." When she was done, the pen slipped from her fingers and rolled to the rail. Her eyes closed like the act of writing had used up the day's light. I picked up the pamphlet. 3 short lines. Wobbly, uneven, but legible enough to stab. Mom knew. He came for me. Baby his. For a second, the letters blurred. I thought it was my eyes failing me. Then I realized the shake was in my hands. I looked back at her. Her lashes fluttered. Not quite asleep. Not quite awake. A tear slid from the corner of her eye into her hairline, disappearing into the gauze. "He hurt you?" I asked, the words scraping their way out. Her head moved the tiniest fraction, side to side. "Not that. Something else." Her lips formed a shape. I bent close enough to feel her exhale against my cheek. "Deals," she whispered, more air than sound. "Money, church, parking lot." The rest dissolved into a rasp. Her heart monitor ticked a warning increase. I hit the call button. Morgan appeared fast, eyes going from Clara's face to the paper in my hand. She didn't ask to see it. She just said, "Enough for now," and eased me back from the bed. In the hallway, She closed the door halfway, giving us a sliver of privacy. Did she say anything? She asked. She wrote, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like a recording played at the wrong speed. I showed her the pamphlet. Morgan read it once, then again, slower. Her mouth thinned into a line that said she'd seen a lot, but not this. You need to keep that safe, she said. Photograph it, send it to yourself, someone you trust. Paper disappears in cases like this. Files get misfiled. She's saying, I swallowed. The words tasted like rust. She's saying, my wife knew, that he came for her, that. I couldn't finish the last part without putting a fist through the wall. Morgan didn't comment. Nurses learn to leave certain sentences unfinished. I can document that she attempted communication and that you reported it, she said instead. That way, if it ever comes up, there's a timestamp outside your pocket. Will you get in trouble? I asked. I'll get in trouble if I don't chart what I see, she said. The rest is above my pay grade. She went back in to check Clara's vitals, leaving me alone with a piece of pamphlet that now weighed more than the rifle in my shed. Mom knew, he came for me. Baby hiss. It rewrote the whole night. This wasn't just a dirty cop losing his temper on my porch. This was fallout from something that started in shadows I never looked into, because I trusted the people standing in them. I stepped into the family restroom, locked the door, and set the pamphlet on the edge of the sink. Took a picture, then another, wider, with the hospital room number visible through the crack of the open door behind me in the mirror. Context. Location. Proof that this hadn't been scribbled on my kitchen table in a fit of paranoia. I emailed the photos to an account I hadn't used since before Clara was born. A ghost address from a life where we didn't write names in address books. Then I folded the pamphlet into my wallet behind an old photo of Clara at 8, missing her front teeth, arms around Felix's neck as he tried to wriggle free. When I came out, Lila was at the nurse's station, voice pitched just loud enough to be a problem. He's been acting strange, she was saying, barely sleeping, obsessing over what happened, blaming himself. I'm scared it's you know. From before, the charge nurse, a calm woman with silver streaking her hair, nodded like she'd heard versions of this before. Has he expressed any intent to harm himself or others? Lila glanced over her shoulder and spotted me. Her expression flickered. Caught. Recalibrating. No, she said quickly. I don't want him to spiral. I was asking if there were counseling resources. Someone who understands veterans. If I hadn't heard the kitchen conversation, I might have believed her. Might have even been grateful. That was the ugly genius of it. I can get you a list, the nurse said. We have a liaison who works with the VA. It's good you're thinking about support early. Thank you, Lila said, slipping easily into the role of concerned spouse. When the nurse turned away, her eyes met mine. For a heartbeat, we just stood there, two people holding different scripts. How is she? She asked, nodding toward Clara's door. She woke up, I said. She wrote a few words. Lila's smile flashed, quick and bright. That's amazing. What did she say? I held her gaze a second too long. She was out of it, I lied. Didn't make much sense. The doctor said not to push. Poor baby, Lila murmured, more reflex than prayer. Poor baby, the one she'd let a predator orbit. I'm going to sit with her a while, I said. You check on Felix. She started toward his room, then hesitated. Mason. When you went home last night, you didn't do anything drastic, did you? Like what? I asked. I don't know, she said quickly. You just looked. I've never seen you like that. I don't want you doing something that makes this harder. It was almost funny, hearing that from the woman who'd invited a loaded gun into our lives. I changed my shirt, I said. That's about as drastic as it got. She studied me, looking for tells. I let her see just enough exhaustion to support her narrative. A tired man, a man in over his head. A man ripe for help. Inside Clara's room again, I sat and watched her breathe. The bruise on her temple, the tape on her arm, the rise and fall under the blanket where a smaller heartbeat worked too hard. All collateral damage in a story written without my consent. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I missed it. I missed him. I missed her. That's on me. But I see it now, all of it. I promise you, this isn't how your story ends. Her fingers twitched again, just once, as if squeezing a trigger I'd placed in her hand. On the yellow pad back at the house, I'd written 4 lines. Evidence of the affair, evidence of intent, evidence of corruption, protect Clara and Felix. Clara had just handed me all 3 of the first in 12 words. I walked out of ICU with the pamphlet in my pocket and a new line forming in my head: make them afraid of the truth. The next 72 hours belonged to patience and small violences that don't leave marks. I didn't need to hurt Grant with my hands. I needed to hurt him with the feeling that someone was always watching, always closer than he thought, always one step ahead of the locks and lies he trusted to keep him safe. I started with his morning routine, because routines are where men feel safest. Grant lived alone in a ranch house 2 miles from the station, the kind of place with a long driveway and neighbors far enough away that sound didn't carry. I'd driven past it twice in daylight, once at dusk, mapping sight lines and blind spots the way I used to map compounds in places where one mistake meant a body bag flight home. On the third night after Clara wrote those 12 words, I parked the truck a quarter-mile down a logging road and walked the rest. No flashlight. Moon was waning, sky clear enough to see by starlight once your eyes adjusted. The back of his property bordered state forest, which meant no fences, no cameras, just pine needles underfoot, and the slow creak of trees settling. His bedroom light went dark at 11:47. I waited another 40 minutes, then moved. The deck behind his house had a loose board on the far corner, the kind that creaks when you step wrong, but stays silent if you know it's there. I stepped right. His back door had a cheap keyed deadbolt, the kind you see on contractor-grade builds. I didn't pick it. I didn't need inside yet. I needed him to know someone had been close. On his grill, I rearranged the propane tank, moved it from the left side to the right, turned the valve a 1/4 inch tighter than it had been, small enough he'd doubt himself when he noticed. On the deck table, I shifted his coffee mug so the handle faced a different direction. Under the doormat, I left a playing card, the ace of spades, the one they used to call the death card in a war nobody liked to remember. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't supposed to be. I left the same way I came, boots silent, breathing controlled, heart rate steady, no adrenaline, just work. 2 nights later, I did it again. This time I unscrewed his porch light bulb halfway, so when he flipped the switch, nothing happened. I moved a potted plant from one side of the step to the other. And on his driver's seat, left unlocked because men who believe they own a town don't lock their trucks, I placed a single .308 casing standing upright in the cup holder, the same caliber I'd left in the ashes of his storage unit. During the days I stayed visible. I went to the hospital. I signed the papers Grant wanted, the ones that called my children's shooting an accident because a man under pressure does what he's told. I let Lila fuss over me in front of the nurses, let her build her narrative about the fragile veteran who needed managing. I played the part so well she started believing her own performance. But at night, I became something else. On the 5th night, Grant's garbage cans were out by the road for morning pickup. I took one, emptied half of it into a bag I'd carry back to my truck, then placed the can in the middle of his driveway. Not tipped, not spilled, just moved, deliberate. A message written in the language of small disturbances. I knew he'd gotten it when I drove past the station the next afternoon and saw him through the window, phone pressed to his ear, jaw tight, free hand rubbing his temple like he was trying to erase a headache that lived behind his eyes. He hung up, stared at his desk, then swept a stack of folders onto the floor hard enough that a deputy 2 desks over looked up with concern. The cracks were starting. By the 7th night, I escalated. His patrol vehicle sat in his driveway, unmarked but obvious. I didn't touch it. Instead, I left a strip of black electrical tape across the driver's side mirror, positioned exactly vertical. In the military, we used to mark targets that way. Tape on a scope, a window, a door frame, so the next team knew where to look. He'd been on enough joint operations to recognize the habit. Inside his mailbox, I left a folded piece of paper, no words, just a hand-drawn map of his property, with a single X marked on his bedroom window. The beauty of psychological pressure is that it doesn't require proof. It doesn't need a courtroom or a witness. It just needs a man alone in the dark, wondering who's watching and when they'll stop playing. I monitored his radio frequency from a scanner I'd pulled from storage. 2 days after the map, he called dispatch at 2:18 in the morning, reporting a prowler. A deputy rolled out, checked the perimeter, found nothing. Probably a deer, boss, the deputy said over the radio. Tracks by the tree line, but nothing human. Grant didn't respond. He knew the difference between a deer and a ghost. At the hospital, Morgan pulled me aside during one of my visits. Sheriff came by asking about you, she said quietly. Wanted to know your schedule, how often you're here, if you've seemed stable. What did you tell him? I asked. That patient information is private, and he'd need a warrant, she said. But Mason, he's building something. Don't give him the nails. I thanked her, then went to sit with Felix. He still hadn't woken, but his numbers were better, swelling down, brain activity improving. Harper said the coma was protective now, not critical, his body buying time to heal. You're tougher than I ever gave you credit for, I told him, smoothing the hair off his forehead. When you wake up, we're going fishing, somewhere quiet, somewhere no one knows our names. That night, I didn't go to Grant's house. I went to the station, not inside. That was a bridge too far, but in the employee lot behind the building, I found his assigned spot. I didn't slash his tires or key his paint. I placed a small stone under his rear driver's side tire, the kind that makes a clicking sound every rotation, subtle but maddening once you notice it. And on his windshield, under the wiper blade, I left a photocopy of a news article from 15 years back. A story about a dirty cop in another county who'd been found in his garage with the engine running and a note that said he was sorry. I didn't write anything on it. I didn't need to. The next morning, I sat in the diner across from the station with a clear view of the parking lot. Grant came out at 9:15, saw the paper, read it, and stood frozen for a full 10 seconds. Then he crumpled it, looked around the lot like he might catch someone watching, and climbed into his truck. The stone clicked. He stopped, got out, checked the tire, found nothing obvious, got back in, clicked, clicked, clicked. He drove away faster than he should have on a residential street. At the hospital that afternoon, Lila cornered me in the hallway outside Felix's room. Grant said you've been following him, she said, arms crossed, voice low and sharp. I've been here, I said. Or home. Where would I follow him? He says things have been happening at his house. Strange things. Like what? I asked. She hesitated, realizing she'd walked into explaining something she wasn't supposed to know details about. I don't know. He thinks you're trying to intimidate him. Why would I do that? I asked, meeting her eyes without blinking. He's the law. I'm just a tired old man who signed the papers he wanted. Isn't that what you told me to do? She searched my face for the lie, but I'd spent decades wearing masks in rooms full of people trained to see through them. She wouldn't find it. Just don't make this worse, she said finally. Worse than our kids getting shot? I asked. I didn't think that was possible. She flinched and walked away, heels clicking on tile like little hammers on nails she didn't see me holding. That night, I didn't visit Grant's house. I let the silence do the work. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't the knock on the door. It's the night the knock doesn't come and you spend the whole dark waiting for it anyway. On my yellow pad at home, I added a new line. Let him break himself. The pressure I'd been applying to Grant had a side effect I hadn't anticipated. It made other people nervous too. Nervous people make mistakes. Mistakes create opportunities. 3 days after I left the article on his windshield, a young deputy showed up at my door. Early 20s, clean uniform, name tag that said Tristan. He stood on my porch with his hands away from his belt, the posture of someone who didn't want to be mistaken for a threat. Mr. Mason, he said, can I have a few minutes? Off the record. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. If it's off the record, why are you in uniform? Because if I came in plain clothes, someone would notice, he said. At least this way, I look like I'm following up on the incident report. Smart kid. Come in, I said. He followed me to the kitchen, declined the offer of coffee, and sat at the table like a man who didn't plan to stay long. I stayed standing, watching him sort through whatever speech he'd rehearsed on the drive over. I know what Grant did, he said finally. Not just to your family. I mean the other stuff, the stuff he's been running for years. And you're telling me this because, I asked. Because I tried telling Internal Affairs 2 months ago and my report disappeared, he said. Then I tried telling the state police and suddenly, I'm on desk duty for a performance review. Grant owns this department. He owns half the county, but I can't just sit there and watch him destroy evidence and ruin lives. You're risking a lot coming here, I said. I know, Tristan replied, but after what he did to your kids, I can't sleep. I keep thinking, what if it was my sister? What if I'm the guy who had the proof and did nothing? I pulled out a chair and sat across from him. What kind of proof? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thumb drive. Digital copies of files that were supposed to be erased. Traffic stop reports where drugs got lost before evidence lockup. Arrest logs where charges disappeared. Bank deposits that don't match his salary. I've been collecting it for 8 months, keeping it off the station servers. Why not take it to the feds yourself? I asked. Because I'm a 23-year-old deputy with 6 months on the job, he said. They'll call it a vendetta. They'll say I'm bitter about desk duty or trying to make a name for myself. But you're a victim. You have standing and you have something I don't. What's that? People listen when a soldier talks, he said, especially one with a record like yours. So he'd look me up too. What do you want in return? I asked. Immunity, he said. I sat on this for months. That makes me complicit in some of this. Even if I didn't participate, I need a guarantee that when this goes public, I'm a witness, not a defendant. I respected the honesty. I can't make that promise, I said. But I know someone who can. His eyes narrowed. Who? A federal judge, I said. Retired now, but still connected. We served together a long time ago. If anyone can broker a deal that keeps you clean while burying Grant, it's him. Tristan exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since he parked. When can you call him? Tonight, I said. But first, I need to know, how deep does this go? Who else is dirty? 2 other deputies for sure, he said. Maybe 3. The rest are just lazy or scared. The mayor knows something's off, but looks the other way, because Grant delivers campaign donations. The district attorney won't touch him because half her wins come from Grant's clean arrests. It was bigger than I'd thought, not just one bad cop, a whole ecosystem built to protect him. And Lila? I asked. My wife. How much does she know? Tristan shifted uncomfortably. I've seen her at the station. More than a spouse should visit. She's familiar with some of the deputies. They joke about her bringing Grant lunch. I don't know details, but it's not professional. I already knew the answer, but hearing it from someone outside my head made it real in a different way. Leave the drive with me, I said. I'll reach out to my contact. You go back. Act normal. Keep your head down. If Grant asks, you came here to check on the family, see if we needed anything. Standard community outreach. Can you do that? Yes, sir, he said. And Tristan, I added as he stood. Don't be a hero. If this goes sideways, you run. You don't know this town your life. He nodded, shook my hand, and left the way he came, quick, quiet, and looking over his shoulder. That night, I sat in the shed with a burner phone I'd picked up from a gas station 2 towns over. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 15 years. It rang 4 times before a voice answered, rough with age and whiskey. Preston, the voice said. It's Mason, I said. I need a favor. Silence, then a low chuckle. Mason, I thought you were dead, or at least smart enough to stay off the grid. I was, I said, until a dirty sheriff shot my kids. The humor drained from his voice. Tell me. I gave him the short version. The shooting, the cover-up, the affair, Clara's note, Tristan's evidence. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. You planning to kill him? Preston asked. No, I said. I'm planning to destroy him legally, but I need someone who can make the charges stick and keep a young deputy out of the blast radius. You still got that patience I remember? He asked. The kind that made you sit in a hide for 3 days waiting for one shot. More than ever, I said. Good, Preston replied, because this won't be fast. Federal corruption cases take time, especially when local law enforcement is compromised. But if you've got hard evidence and a cooperating witness, I can make calls. I know a prosecutor in the Eastern District who owes me. She's clean, ambitious, and hates dirty cops. How long? I asked. 2 weeks to review the evidence, another week to get a grand jury if it's solid, then warrants, arrests, the whole circus. You'll need to keep your family safe in the meantime. If Grant figures out what's coming, he'll burn everything and everyone. He's already trying, I said. I've been keeping him distracted. Preston laughed, low and dark. I don't want to know. Just don't give him a reason to put you in cuffs before we can put him in them. Stay clean, stay visible, and for God's sake, don't do anything a jury could call premeditated. Understood, I said. One more thing, he added. Your wife, if she's complicit, she's going down too. You ready for that? I looked through the shed window at the house where Layla was probably asleep, dreaming of a life where her choices didn't have consequences. She made her choice, I said. I'm making mine. Send me the evidence, Preston said. Encrypted. I'll be in touch. The line went dead. I sat in the shed for another hour, the thumb drive on the workbench beside my old rifle, 2 kinds of ammunition that would both find their mark eventually. On my yellow pad, I crossed off another line and added a new one. Bring in the law that matters. The trap was set. The walls were closing. Grant just didn't know he was already inside. Preston moved faster than a retired man should. By midweek, he'd set up a secure drop for Tristan's files and looped in a federal prosecutor who didn't smile in her emails. While they built their case, I needed noise, enough light that Grant couldn't quietly burn evidence without half the county noticing the smoke. Noise came wrapped in civic duty. The town had a community forum every month in the high school gym. Budget gripes, potholes, church bake sales, the same men arguing about taxes since the 90s. This time, concern was public safety. Perfect. I sat 3 rows back on the aisle, where Grant couldn't miss me. Layla came in 10 minutes late, sunglasses on inside, hair done like a widow in a movie. She didn't sit with me. She found a seat on the other side of the gym, 2 bleachers up, where she could watch both Grant and me without choosing a side in public. Tristan stood in the back by the double doors, out of uniform, ball cap low. In his hands, a manila envelope thick enough to matter. I told him not to speak unless the room was ready to hear it. The room would tell us. Grant took the microphone first, hands spread in that politician ballet, open palms, easy smile, the concerned shepherd tending his flock. I know it's been a hard week, he said. We've all been shaken by an unfortunate incident. Let me assure you, the investigation is thorough and impartial. We're committed to transparency. He loved that word. It was prettier than truth because it didn't require any. Questions started small. Speeds on County Road 12, break-ins near the mill. Then a woman from the 3rd row asked what everyone else didn't know how to shape. How does a sheriff's weapon discharge twice on a family's porch without any consequences? Grant didn't blink. We follow the facts, ma'am. Body cams were malfunctioning due to a firmware update. There were several moving parts. A deputy stumbled, and I reacted to a perceived threat. It's tragic. We take full responsibility for reviewing our procedures. Body cams malfunctioned? Someone echoed. A murmur rolled across the seats like a small wave hitting a seawall. People felt it. They just needed someone to push. That someone walked to the comment microphone in a gray hoodie with the hood half up. Tristan's voice didn't shake. I'd like to present records obtained through legal means that suggest the sheriff's department has a pattern of lost footage and missing evidence when it suits them. Grant's head snapped toward him. State your name, he said, too fast. Citizen, Tristan replied, and I've printed copies for anyone who cares to read. Bank deposits inconsistent with salary, evidence logs with gaps, drug seizures that never reach lockup. Also, a list of shell units at Ridgeview Self-Storage, leased under aliases that match addresses linked to this department. A whisper of paper on paper as he opened the envelope, pulled stacks of copies, and handed them to the teenagers stationed as ushers. They went row by row, passing pages like hymnals. People read, people frowned. People looked up at Grant like he'd just forgotten a line he'd practiced. Those are fabricated, Grant said, smile thinning. Anyone with a printer can make a spreadsheet. True, Tristan said, which is why I also brought this. He lifted a small voice recorder and pressed play. The gym filled with the tinny sound of my kitchen, Layla's voice, worried and sharp, and Grant's voice, smooth as he talked about warrants and stories and stability. He said he'd try not to hurt anyone. He said, your daughter didn't leave me many options. He said, we just have to give him the right dream to wake up in. The room went very still, not like judgment, like gravity had doubled. Layla's sunglasses didn't hide the flinch. Her hands pressed flat on her knees, as if she could hold herself stationary by force. A few heads turned her way. She dug her nails into her palms and kept looking at the floor. I didn't move. I let the sound hang and die on its own. Grant's face reddened down his neck. Illegally obtained recordings don't prove anything, he said, and taking private conversations out of context is slander. It's my kitchen, I said from my seat, not raising my voice. Context is a woman asking if anyone saw the sheriff shoot her kids. Every eye that hadn't already been on me fell there. It wasn't the first time I'd said words like that aloud. It was the first time I said them where they could shape a crowd. A man in a suit near the back, late 50s, shoulders like he used to carry more, stepped forward. Preston never looked like a judge. He looked like the fist judges kept in their pocket for when a gavel wasn't enough. He didn't take the mic. He flashed a badge that wasn't local and spoke in a voice tuned to rooms like this. I'm here in coordination with a federal prosecutor reviewing allegations of corruption in this county, he said. We are issuing preservation notices to the sheriff's department and the district attorney's office. Do not destroy, alter, or conceal any records. There will be consequences if you do. We'll be meeting with the mayor and council after this. If any citizen has documents relevant to this matter, there will be a secure drop outside the clerk's office starting tomorrow. He didn't say investigation. He didn't have to. The room heard it anyway. Grant laughed, too loud. This is a stunt, some washed-up soldier with an axe to grind, and a retired judge playing cowboy. Preston looked at him like a man measuring an exit wound. Careful, he said. Cowboys don't carry subpoenas. A murmur broke into voices. Someone shouted shame from the bleachers. Another yelled, what about Ridgeview? A man in a baseball cap said, my cousin lost his truck because of a planted baggie. And suddenly it wasn't about me anymore. It was about an entire town realizing the man they smiled at in the parade had been picking their pockets and shoving dirt under their rocks. Grant's command voice returned by instinct. Meeting's over, he announced, trying to drown the noise. Everyone go home. No, a woman near the front said. She stood, Violet the librarian, always quiet until she wasn't. You don't get to tell us to go home, not tonight. The mayor's face was ash under fluorescent lights. He banged a little wooden mallet like a toy against the table and managed to adjourn the forum on paper if not in reality. People didn't leave. They clustered in tight circles passing papers Tristan had handed them, showing each other bank numbers and dates, and the way lies look when you print them. Grant stalked down the aisle toward the exit. On his way past me, he stopped, leaned close enough that only I could hear. His breath smelled like coffee and rot. Enjoy your circus, he said. By morning, it's contained. You can't contain what you don't own, I said. His jaw worked. He glanced up at the bleachers. Layla stood when he reached the stairwell, met him halfway. He took her by the elbow, firm, not gentle. Not for show now, for control. We're leaving, he told her. She didn't look at me. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she knew that if she met my eyes and saw what was in them now, there'd be no pretending left. As they pushed through the doors into the humid evening, Preston slid into the seat beside me. He's going to run at you, he said. Cornered men pick the fight they think they can win. I'm counting on it, I said. Keep your hands clean, he warned. I can only save you from one kind of trouble. Then save room on your calendar, I said. Tonight's busy. Outside sirens sounded from 3 different directions. Not for me, not yet. For the station, the clerk's office, the places Grant would sprint to if he thought he could get to a shredder before anyone else did. He was smart enough to know shredders don't fix hard drives. Panic steals that kind of sense. Tristan approached, face pale with adrenaline come down. It landed, he said. People are talking. You go home, I told him. Call in sick tomorrow. Your part's done until you hear from Preston's people. He nodded, swallowed, and left with his put up again. Just a man in a gray sweater disappearing into a town that suddenly felt new to itself. I walked out under the gym's flickering light and felt the air shift. Before tonight, this had been my private war. Now it was public, loud, messy. Good. Public messes are harder to clean when you're in the spotlight. The sky over the ridge was black as a barrel. At home, the porch would be dark. The hinge would still complain softly when I opened the back door. The shed would still smell like oil and old decisions. I wasn't going there to sleep. I was going there to wait. Grant came for me 3 nights after the town hall, exactly when a cornered man runs out of options and picks the fight he thinks he understands. I heard the truck before I saw it. No headlights. Engine throttled low. Tires crunching gravel at the edge of my property line around 2:30 in the morning. I'd been awake in the dark of my living room for 2 hours, rifle across my lap, night vision monocular on the coffee table. Every light in the house off except the porch bulb I'd left burning like bait. Through the window, I watched 3 shadows peel away from the tree line. Grant in the center, flanked by 2 deputies I recognized from the station, the ones Tristan had flagged as dirty. They advanced tactically, rifles low and ready, scanning every angle like men who'd done this before to people who couldn't fight back. They had no idea the man they were chasing had spent years turning houses just like this one into death traps. I had spent the entire afternoon getting ready. A tripwire along the rear fence connected to nothing more than a bundle of tin cans in the shed. Noisy, harmless, just a diversion. Motion sensor lights I'd rewired so they'd stay off until I flipped a switch from inside. Furniture shifted around to create narrow kill zones where men crowd together and lose their edge. The kind of setup you pick up when your job is clearing rooms where a single error gets you shipped home under a flag. I crept to the kitchen, staying low, and through the breaker I'd isolated earlier. Every outdoor light flared on at once. Porch, driveway, backyard floods. Grant and his men froze, blinded, throwing their hands up to block the glare. "This is Sheriff Grant," he called toward the house, his voice strained. "We've got a warrant for your arrest. Step out with your hands where I can see them." No warrant existed, not at 3 in the morning with zero backup, no announcement, no marked cars. This wasn't law enforcement, it was an assassination wearing a badge. I stayed silent. I slid out the side door into the shadow between the house and the detached garage, working my way around wide. The night vision revealed it all. Grant motioning to his deputies, sending them left and right while he stayed centered. One crept toward the back door, the other edged along the porch rail. The deputy at the back door tried the handle, locked. He glanced back at Grant, who gave a nod. The deputy drove his boot into it, the frame cracked apart, the door burst open and he stepped into my kitchen, weapon raised. From 30 feet away, I set off the air horn I'd rigged inside the pantry. The sound cracked through the small room, disorienting. The deputy whirled, fired twice into empty darkness, then staggered back out swearing. "He's inside," the deputy hissed. "It's rigged." Grant's jaw tightened. He surveyed the property, weighing his next move, then noticed the shed, its door hanging slightly open. He walked toward it, sure of himself. Men like him always assume sheds hide the answers. He stepped in. I let him take 3 steps before shutting the door behind him from outside and sliding the latch shut. "Evening, Sheriff," I said through the crack. He whirled, weapon rising, but the angle was off. I wasn't standing in the doorway. I was positioned to the side, rifle aimed through a knothole I'd widened that same afternoon. "Your deputies are in my crosshairs," I said. "Steady. Red dot on the one near the porch. Infrared on the one working through the garden. I can take them both down before you get that door open. Or you can order them to drop their weapons and walk to the driveway. Your choice." Quiet, then his voice, lower, uglier. "You won't fire on cops, you're not that dumb. You put bullets in my kids on my own porch," I said. "Dumb walked out the door a while ago. I didn't actually need to fire, I just needed him convinced I would." 2 weeks of being stalked by an enemy he couldn't see had already worn his nerves thin. I was only tugging the final thread. "Stand down," he finally shouted to his men. "Drop your weapons. Get back to the truck." "Smart move," I said. The deputies hesitated, then obeyed, dropping their sidearms into the grass and backing away slowly, palms out. Once they reached the truck, I repositioned, walked to the shed door, and pulled it open. Grant charged out fast, throwing a punch. I stepped aside, let his momentum carry him forward, then dropped him with a joint lock I'd drilled on men twice his size, in another life entirely. His weapon clattered across the gravel. I booted it away. "Federal agents are 3 minutes out," I said, my knee against his back. "Preston called it in the moment your truck left the county road. It's over for you." He struggled once, then went still, chest heaving into the dirt. "You think this changes anything?" he snarled. "You think they'll take your word over mine? They already have," I said. Tristan's testimony, the recordings, the bank records, Clara's statement. "There's no way out of this for you." Sirens grew louder in the distance, red and blue lights strobing through the trees. Not local units, federal. Preston's team, arriving right on schedule. 2 SUVs tore up the driveway, agents pouring out with weapons and badges and voices that didn't request, they ordered. I let Grant go, backed off, hands raised and open, rifle already resting on the ground 10 feet behind me. An agent in tactical gear walked up. "Mason, that's right," I said. "We'll need your statement." She said, "But you're free to step back." They cuffed Grant, recited his rights in a tone that meant every word. The deputies were already loaded into the back of another vehicle, faces drained, futures shrinking fast. Grant looked at me as they marched him past. "Your wife's going down too," he said. "You know that." "I know," I said. He grinned, cruel and twisted. Was she worth it? I gave him nothing. Some questions don't deserve a response. The trial dragged on for 6 months. Federal prosecutors take their time and they don't slip up. Grant faced charges of corruption, tampering with evidence, conspiracy, and 2 counts of attempted murder. The deputies turned on him for reduced sentences. Layla was charged as an accessory once investigators uncovered texts, wire transfers, and hotel receipts that laid out a timeline she couldn't talk her way around. I sat in the courtroom gallery every single day Clara was able to join me. Felix was home by then, healing slowly. His speech still a bit uneven, but his smile unchanged. Harper warned he might need years of therapy, but he'd walk, he'd speak, he'd live. That was more than enough. Clara's baby arrived early. A girl, tiny and loud and full of life. The DNA results confirmed what we already knew. The prosecutor entered it as evidence. Clara turned it into fuel. She took the stand with her daughter 3 floors below in the courthouse nursery, her voice unwavering, her hands steady. He told my mother he'd make the problem disappear, she said from the witness stand. The problem was me and my baby. The jury took 4 hours to decide. Grant received life with no parole. The deputies got 15 and 12 years. Lila got 8 years reduced to 5 for her cooperation. She wouldn't meet my eyes when the verdict was read. She stared at the floor, small and drained, like she'd run out of excuses at last. I felt no victory, just exhaustion. Outside the courthouse after the verdict, Preston and I stood beneath a sky so brilliant blue it stung to look at. You handled it cleanly, he said. That counts for something. It doesn't give them back the time they lost, I said. No, he agreed, but it stops him from stealing any more. I sold the house a month afterward. Too many ghosts soaked into the walls, too much blood bleach couldn't touch. Clara and Felix moved with me to a town 3 states away where no one recognized our name, and the sheriff's office had never crossed paths with Grant. We found a small place near a lake. Felix went back to school, made a friend who loved the same shows. Clara, enrolled in online courses, her daughter napping in a bassinet next to her desk. I took a part-time job at a hardware store, the kind where nobody asked about your past. One night, I sat on the porch with Clara, while Felix skipped stones down by the water. Her daughter, she'd named her Hope, and I didn't push back, slept in her arms. Do you forgive her? Clara asked. She didn't say Mom. She hadn't called Lila that since the trial ended. No, I said, but I don't carry her weight anymore. That's close enough. I'm sorry I waited to tell you, she said softly. About him, about what happened. I thought I could deal with it alone. You were a kid just trying to survive, I said. That's nothing to be sorry for. She rested her head against my shoulder, and we watched Felix send a stone skipping 5 times before it sank. Do you think we'll be all right? She asked. I thought of the rifle still tucked in its case under my bed, unloaded now, but still there. I thought of the nightmares that pulled me awake twice a week, Grant's voice echoing in the kitchen, Lila's hand resting on his arm. I thought of Felix's limp and Clara's scars, and the baby who'd never meet the man whose blood ran through her. We're already all right, I said. This is just us healing further. Felix bounded up the porch steps, breathless, beaming. Dad, did you catch that? 5 skips. I caught it, I said. New personal best. He wrapped his arms around my leg, then dashed back down, already searching for the next perfect stone. Justice doesn't come with noise. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or trumpets. It's silent. It's a child's laughter echoing by a lake. It's a daughter cradling her baby with nothing to fear. It's a man who spent 25 years playing someone else, finally learning how to simply be a father. I got up, stretched, and headed down toward the water. Felix passed me a stone, flat and smooth. Your turn, he said. I let it fly. It skipped 6 times before vanishing beneath the surface, leaving nothing but ripples that spread and slowly faded into stillness. We were home.
फूक मारो जोर से इधर देखो, बाय बाय। वे, इधर देखो, सेबे, इधर देखो। हाँ, पकड़ के चलो, चलाओ, चलाओ गाड़ी। फूक मारो
कुछ भी नहीं चाहिए।
जोर से। फूक मारो। इधर देखो, इधर देखो, बाय बाय। वे, इधर देखो, सेबे, इधर देखो। हाँ, पकड़ के चलो, चलाओ, चलाओ गाड़ी।